Michael Boldin, 10thAmendmentCenter.com. Hey, forget what you're saying, states' rights. The New Republic just says blow up the Congress. How's that sound?
Well, Congress has been a rubber stamp for a long time, Alex, whether it's been a Bush or a Clinton or an Obama in office. And they don't want us to know that we actually have power. We have powers as individuals in our communities and in our states to actually make something happen. That's why I was so excited to see Julie Wilson's report on your site last week talking about what happened here in California vis-a-vis indefinite detention under the National Defense Authorization Act. That is the power the government claims to be able to snatch anybody off the street if they claim that you're an enemy. In other words, government-sanctioned kidnapping. You don't get access to a lawyer, no trial, no court, no nothing. If they don't like you, it's V for Vendetta, black bag, and you're gone. That's what they claim the power to do. But thankfully, people realize that following James Madison's advice, you know, the father of the Constitution, to resist these people is really the path forward. And it has nothing to do with whatever Obama or his rubber stamp Congress has to say. We have the power in our states.
Break down what this country was founded on versus the authoritarians that say, no, all power flows out of the chief executive.
Well, we can do an exact 180. What we have today is totally opposite. That whenever there's something wrong, we go to the federal imperial Congress or the imperial executive to tell us how to fix things. Every single thing, they want us to go to them. But the truth of the matter is as James Madison wrote in Federalist 45, the powers delegated to the federal government are, quote, few and defined, and those reserved to the states are numerous and indefinite. The people of the states are supposed to have the power to do whatever they want, basically. I mean, set up their society the way they want. This is the only system where you can have a huge number of economic, political, and religious ideologies all living together under a big defense umbrella in peace. When you have this one-size-fits-all solution, this idea that one side, one controlled opposition side or the other controlled opposition side is going to take over the whole enchilada, we all lose. And it's exciting to see that some people are learning that we aren't supposed to beg at the altar of federal power to live free. We need to learn how to live free whether they want us to or not. Well, and this is what they've been doing. The Southern Poverty Law Center, who I know you've documented for many years, these crooks and criminals and liars, they named me one of the 25 racist radical leaders of the right in the last couple of years.
Oh, very racist, yes.
So I guess I've been told this is a badge of honor. If they call you out, you're obviously doing something good.
But the whole point is we're the opposite of race. I follow your work of everybody. They've said Ron Paul's a racist and all this stuff. I mean, but with him, at least there was some vague newsletter when he had like 14 brands out, you know, like 2 articles out of 5,000 that they could claim was something. I mean, this is getting insane where they'll use comments on my website as proof by some anonymous commenter or have MSNBC say I'm deeply racist and behind the Boston bombing with no proof. I mean, it really shows a desperateness.
Well, here at the 10th Amendment Center, and like you, we act like with the freight train mentality. No matter what they throw at us, we're not going to get distracted by their garbage because their goal is to distract us in this little petty debate over who's racist and who's not.
Oh, no, I agree. I'm only bringing it up to show what amoral, lawless, bankrupt, intellectually really bad, nasty race pimps they are. I mean, they're what they're accusing us of.
Sure, and it's harder and harder for them to do that as we talk about the success of a left-right coalition in California to pass Assembly Bill 351, rejecting the policy of indefinite...
Yeah, that's why we got you back, because they want to divide us along left and right instead of all Americans should be against secret arrest.
Certainly, kidnapping is bad. Murder is bad. Unconstitutional, undeclared wars is bad. It's very hard for them to call us that the more we get this out. But certainly, as AB 351 was signed by Jerry Brown, I mean, you don't expect anything good to come out of California, but it did because of a massive left-right coalition between Tea Party and Occupy, ACLU, 10th Amendment Center, Oath Keepers, all across the board. There's no way to resist that. When you get enough people standing up and saying, we want to say no, it's going to happen.
Well, again, I'm not going to debate the federal takeover. I'm just going to say that you're probably a bad man and probably an extremist, and that I'm more intellectual than you because I'm an idiot.
Well, that's the attitude they throw at us. And when Bush was in office, I'll tell you, our organization started in 2006. And when Bush was in office, we used to get called by neocons, hey, you communists, go back to Cuba, because we were opposing federal power.
Oh, no, yeah. Whoever's in power, the right always calls you a communist. That's what they call me. The establishment, neocon right, called me a hardcore commie. And then, as soon as the Democrats come in, I'm now a racist, fascist. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went to your event here in Los Angeles a number of years ago when you hosted that event. And, back then the neocons hated you. Now they're starting to learn. And I think the goal in these type of situations is every time the power changes hands from one side to the other, we keep bringing a few more people from the grassroots.
I was about to say, this isn't working like it used to, except for the dumbest people on the left and right. You're talking about my big 9/11 event with a couple thousand people at it.
Right. I mean, and it brought so many different types of people together. And I think this is the message that you've been talking about. What we talk about at 10th Amendment Center, what Ron Paul has been talking about. Liberty is popular. You can reach people on single-issue coalitions like we did here in California.
You mean racism, black, Hispanic, white, Asian, old, young, Jewish, German, Palestinian, Chinese, all together. This is hardcore racism.
Well, James Madison wrote in Federalist Paper number 46 that we actually can succeed in pushing back against the federal government if we take 4 steps, not in Congress, not in the federal courts, and not in the executive branch. 4 steps in our state. We're supposed to repudiate, we're supposed to stand up and oppose federal actions, call on our governors to speak out against it, and then most importantly, the last 2 things, use state legislative devices to, quote, refuse to cooperate with officers of the Union. We need to start standing down. No longer allow our state and local officials to enforce federal gun control
And
measures.
again, what the feds do, and I want to go over these solutions when we come back, what the feds themselves run by globalists do, so I just bypass that and say, look, they can have their federal argument all day. There is some jurisdiction in some issues. They're lying and claiming total jurisdiction when on record that's not the case. They're actually globalist foreign run by big banks that brag. They've pretty much conquered the federal government, so our redress is now in balance the states. And if the states get out of control, then the feds come in. That's the give and take in the federalist system. But look at how the governor of Wisconsin, when they blocked fishing docks and things that weren't even federally paid for or built, but are on federal land, boat launches, they've just removed the federal barricades and the feds had to back down. So that's why the states are there. Sure, if we just totally lay down, the feds will run over and become imperial, but they're trying this corporate Borg of you will be assimilated. The opposite is happening. I'm seeing a huge awakening. Are you seeing that?
Absolutely. This example in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and other places where people are just defying these federal orders to shut down parks, this is nullification in action. When enough people stand up and say no, they can't ram their laws, regulations, or mandates down our throats.
Michael Boldin, what are the solutions to counter this? What should we be doing at the state level?
The solution is through following the Founding Fathers' advice. We've been talking a little bit about James Madison and his 4 steps, primarily using state or local legislative devices to refuse cooperation with officers of the Union. Check out this report. This is breaking news from Easton, Kansas. They just passed an ordinance, binding law in Easton, Kansas. No agency of the city of Easton, Kansas shall provide material support for or participate in any way in the enforcement of any act, law, treaty, order, rule, or regulation regarding personal firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition within the boundary of the city of Easton, Kansas. You can take action on your county, your city, your town level to get an ordinance passed saying we're not going to abide by federal gun control measures. And Judge Andrew Napolitano was on, I think, Fox Business earlier this year. He said if a state would just stand down and not help the federal government carry this stuff out, it would make those laws, as Judge Knapp said, nearly impossible to enforce. And I'll sure take nearly impossible to enforce over what Obama and his gang want to do today.
Well, take the converse of that. They illegally violate the Constitution in 800-plus cities and 20-something states and will not arrest illegal aliens even when they're committing crimes. So that makes them above the law because no one will deport them. That's an example of nullification right there.
Well, as long as we stop complying, stop helping them, and get our states to pass, like here in California, AB 351, to make the policy here of the state of California to not participate in indefinite detention under NDAA or any other law which purports to authorize indefinite detention of a person here in California, or against gun control measures, or you get a state to pass a law saying, hey, we're not going to implement these exchanges for Obamacare, or the 21 states that have refused to comply with the federal government on marijuana laws. This is a very effective path. James Madison said when you get a bunch of states to refuse to cooperate with officers of the Union, it would create basically roadblocks that he said the federal government would be hardly willing to encounter. And I think Madison was a pretty smart guy. If
Sure.
more and more people would follow him, we would have great effect.
Sure, well, here's the problem. They're using states' rights to try to get guns, to let illegals practice law, to let illegals have driver's license and vote in California, but then saying there's no states' rights if libertarians want to nullify federal gun laws or nullify federal spying or nullify the federal currency and have your own state currency that's constitutional. They are there trying to block that. But there's an example of Governor Jerry Brown. Under real federalism, the federal government should not be allowing him to legalize all the illegals, because that is one of the three things where there's federal purview. The issue here is, I don't think anybody ever makes this point, the Democrats are using nullification already to set up their own little empires. What's your take on that, Michael?
Well, I think everybody uses constitutional tools when it advances them, and they ignore it when it doesn't. So these guys are going to do good things when, well, or bad things when it furthers their own interests. That's all we can expect from the imperial Congress on both sides of the political spectrum. But we're really trying to implement basically what would be a reverse Clower-Piven strategy. If Kansas says, no, we're not going to participate in federal gun control measures, and California says, we're not going to participate in unconstitutional federal drug law measures or the indefinite detention, and another state does Obamacare and another state does this, it basically throws it all back on the federal government, and they don't have the manpower to carry out all their stuff. Without us complying, they just can't do it. Even the National Governors Association just last week put out this scare thing about the so-called shutdown, saying, hey, states help the federal government implement what they said, most federal programs. They all know that they rely on us locally and in our states to participate in...
That's right. That's right. Compliant people will be slaves. Yeah, I mean, we comply and think that's a free society. No, the government's broken the social contract on purpose. It's time to stop working with them whenever you can.
And this is why Gucciardi should be a hero, really, because he didn't, just bow down and say, don't follow those signs as he drove into the NSA data center there in Utah last week. He said, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to try to exercise my rights to free speech. And he did it to the point where they were going to use violence on him. But this is the type of step that more and more people need to take. If it's just Anthony Gucciardi doing it on his own, we're not going to have freedom. We need to follow that type of courage and have more and more people take that type of action. So as regards to the NSA data center in Utah requires 1.7 million gallons of water to operate every single day to keep those supercomputers cool. Well, who's that provided by? A political subdivision of the state of Utah. Well, Utah doesn't have to give them the water. They can turn off the water, and then there's no more NSA data center.
And by the way, folks, we could take over Utah politically. It's already happening, and shut the water off. Because that's not the U.S. government there. That is a globalist crime syndicate setting up a technocratic technocracy.
We don't have to. There's nothing in the Constitution that requires us to help the Fed violate our rights. They're the NSA data center opening up in San Antonio. Well, the electricity is going to be provided by the city of San Antonio. Why does San Antonio have to do that? Turn off the switch. Make it as difficult as possible. Create as many impediments for them to violate our rights. And by the way,
that's what they're doing to us under Cloward and Piven and Agenda 21. They're making it difficult for us and saying they want to make us poor to control us.
Absolutely, but their strategies are very effective. As we see year in and year out, they make it more and more difficult. So we learn from their evil strategies, flip it around on them, just like James Madison advised, and we're going to have a lot of success.
Oh, I agree. Every way you can without breaking laws or whatever. And, of course, individually, do whatever you think's best, folks.
Right.
Sabotage the enemy by not complying and just speak out. Like whenever I see aspartame gum, I speak out at the checkout. Whenever I see people that are pregnant, I go over and tell them how deadly vaccines are. I just fight, and know you're winning every time you do it. All right, 10thAmendmentCenter.com. Michael Boldin, thank you so much for your time, buddy.
Thank you so much for having me back on, Alex.
You bet, and good job helping to get AB 351 signed by the governor out there.
Thank you.
At least, they did something good out there.
Once in a while.
Mr. Moonbeam. Well, that's because they think they can just not implement it, but at least it's so they can act like they're still liberals.
Well, we've got the policy, and now we're going to follow up with step 2.
That's right.